Hi, everyone. I am so proud to speak in front of all of you at the Israel Summit of 2021. My name is Eli Beer. I'm the founder and president of United Hatzalah. I want you to imagine to yourself, all of you. I don't know how many of you are with children or have nieces or nephews. Imagine to yourself you're walking in the center of a city and you're holding the hand of a little 6-year-old niece of yours and you're having a great time. And you buy a candy for your little niece and you give it to her and she unwraps that little candy and she puts it in her mouth. She has a big smile on her face. And you continue walking and all of a sudden she stops and you look at her and she's turning blue. You just realize your little niece is choking in front of your eyes. You're screaming for help. You don't know what to do. And people are surrounding you and people are trying to help. And you yell, call for an ambulance, call for an ambulance. Let's save my niece. Please save my niece. And everyone's trying to help and calling for an ambulance. And all of a sudden, while you're praying to God, someone should save your little niece, you see in the corner of your eye, someone running towards you. He's wearing an orange jacket like this. That person is holding a little orange briefcase. And when he gets to you, he knees down to your little niece and starts performing the Heimlich maneuver. Within a few seconds, a little candy flies out of your niece's throat. And all of a sudden, your niece is starting to breathe again. And the person takes out a little oxygen tank just like this and connects your niece to this oxygen with a mask. And within a few minutes, your niece is back to normal. Then all of a sudden, you see the ambulance coming. You turn to that person who's getting up and about to leave and taking his briefcase. And you say, who are you? Are you a doctor? Are you a nurse? Who are you? And that person says, no, I'm just a shoemaker. I work around the corner. I was middle of fixing some shoes and customers were waiting in my store, but I got a call because I'm a volunteer of United Hatzalah. I have this bag with me 24/7 wherever I am, and I just ran out of my store to save this little child, which is your niece. Thank God your niece is great. She's doing amazing. Look at her now. I have to go back to my store. I have customers waiting for me. You're looking at that person while he's going, and you're looking at that angel and you're saying, wow, thank you, God, for helping saving my little child, my little niece. And then you tell the ambulance crew, thank you, my niece is fine now. And this is what United Hatzalah is. This organization I started when I was a very young child. I was a volunteer in an ambulance in Jerusalem. I used to help people all the time for a year and a half. I was 15 years old when I started volunteering. And I realized every single time when we had emergencies like that little child choking, we used to come a few minutes too late, sometimes a few seconds too late. We couldn't help. When someone is choking, you have very few minutes to save that person choking. When someone is bleeding terribly, you have very few minutes to save that person. When it's too late, it's too late. You can't reverse time of death. Unfortunately, so many people wait for ambulances too long. And I realized that when I was a child for a year and a half volunteering in the back of an ambulance. And then when I was 16 and a half years old, we received an emergency call of about a 7-year-old boy choking while he was having lunch, choking from a little hot dog. And when we arrived, we found this child on the floor. The mother was screaming. It took us 21 minutes to arrive there. We came from the other side of the city. They had a terrible traffic in Yerushalayim. And we tried everything we could. We started performing CPR on this little 7-year-old boy. And then out of nowhere, a doctor runs into this apartment that we were in Jerusalem. And he says, I'm an emergency doctor. I want to help. And he starts helping us. And after like 20 minutes of working on this child, trying to save him, this doctor says there was nothing we could do, just bring a sheet to cover him. I burst out crying. I was only 16 and a half years old, but I realized this doctor arrived because he was a neighbor and he saw an ambulance parked downstairs. That's why he came to help us. What if he would have known about this emergency 21 minutes earlier? What if the ambulance services would have notified this doctor instead of us arriving as the first responders? Why don't we have pre-first responders, this doctor arriving, or maybe the shoemaker living by, who's maybe a paramedic or EMT? And I went over to my friends and I said, why don't we start a service to respond to emergencies before ambulances? Everyone thought it was a great idea. The problem was, how do we receive these emergency calls? Where do we get it from? Who will call us? We don't even have a phone number of people to call us. We went over to the ambulance services in Jerusalem, and we begged them to share the emergency calls with us, to give us every single emergency they have. So that way we will know about the addresses and what's going on, so we can run first and help save a life while the ambulance is stuck in traffic. They didn't like the idea too much. They didn't think it's a proper thing, that if someone calls for an ambulance, they'll get some civilian coming with his pajamas in the middle of the night, or a shoemaker running with hands that are just fixing shoes. They said if someone calls for help, they must wait for an ambulance. In that moment, I realized I'm not going to get their help. So I decided to use Israel's best innovation. I'm sure you all heard of chutzpah. We invented the greatest innovation called chutzpah. And I said, hey, you guys, if you don't want to share the emergency calls with us, I'm going to get the calls without you. And I went ahead and I bought 2 police scanners, these walkie-talkies you used to buy in Radio Shack, which doesn't exist anymore. I had a couple of shekels left for my bar mitzvah. And that's what I did with my money, for my bar mitzvah money. And I bought 2 police scanners. And I said, if you don't want to share the calls with us, we're going to get the calls without you. And we started buffing their emergency calls. And that's how we started, 15 volunteers. We used to listen in to emergency calls that are happening nearby us. So we just stopped everything we did and we just ran to help these people. And then one of the first days that I was listening into their emergency calls on the radio scanner, I was in my father's bookshop in Beit Vagan in Jerusalem, helping my father set up the books. I was 16 and a half years old. I'm listening into emergency calls coming in, and I say, I hope they have an emergency nearby me that I can help. And all of a sudden, a call comes in of a man hit by a car. And I left the store right there, and I ran towards the address that I heard that an ambulance was dispatched to. And when I arrived there, I saw this man on the floor, bleeding terribly, and people were surrounding him, but no one knew what to do. But I was an EMT already. I was a volunteer for a year and a half in an ambulance. I knew what to do. I needed to stop his bleeding, but I had no bandages on me. So I used this thing on my head called a yarmulke. And it's an incredible thing. You use it for religious reasons, but you could use it for many other things. And I took it and I folded this and I used it as a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. I pushed it into the neck where the bleeding came from. And I just was holding it in as much as I could. And when finally the ambulance arrived, they brought bandages and they bandaged him up. He was in a really bad situation and they took him to the hospital. I didn't know what happened to him, but 2 days later I get a phone call. And they say to me, a person says, are you Eli Beer? I said, yes. So this person says, well, my father was treated by you on Pisgah Street in Jerusalem. And you saved his life. He woke up this morning in Hadassah Hospital. And he wants to thank you for saving his life. And I started crying. This was the best phone call I ever got in my life. And I said, I want to come visit him. He said, of course, come. And I came to the hospital. And I met this incredible man. He was about 70 years old. His family was around him. And he was smiling to me. And he says, Bo hena yeled, ani rotza latet lecha chibuk. Come here, child. I want to give you a hug. And he gave me this incredible, and I never felt so good like at that moment. I just felt the hug of a person. I saved his life. And then when he took his hands off me, I realized he had a number on his hand, right here on his hand. He had a number. And I was looking at him and looking at the number. And I said, wow, I just saved a Holocaust survivor. And I burst out crying again. And I said, I can't believe it. This was the best feeling in the world, to save a person's life. But he's a Holocaust survivor. It meant so much more to me when I was able to save him by just stopping his bleeding. I said to my friends, we have to take these motorcycles, they deliver pizza, and turn them into ambulances. We'll call them ambucycles. We need to get volunteers spread out everywhere. So that way, if some emergency happens next to us, we will always have a professional EMT or paramedic nearby who could respond on time in 90 seconds and save that person's life. And that's our goal, 90-second response time. So we started with 15 volunteers. Now, 32 years later, we're holding on almost 6,500 volunteers all around Israel. This is men and women, religious Jews, secular Jews, non-Jews, Arabs, Muslims and Christians, and Druze, and anyone in between. Anyone who has a good heart, anyone who wants to save lives could be part of United Hatzalah. And that's why we call it Hatzalah, which means save, rescue, and united. These are the most important things in Judaism, in my opinion: saving a life, helping others. So that's why we united everyone else in other religions and other beliefs. So since we started, we treated over 4.5 million people.